Europa Universalis V, the latest and grandest strategy game on the market. It's a huge game, and knowing where to begin can be absolutely overwhelming. I've had the pleasure of playing this game for over a year now, thanks employment, and while I'll let Paradox themselves handle the big tutorial, what key information do I feel you must know before you start playing? Hello, my name is Midgeman, and today we're going to cover the 5 things I wish I knew before playing EU5 that I've accumulated in my noggin while playing the game throughout its development. So sit back, relax, and prepare to stare at the largest historical spreadsheet game ever developed. Tip 1. Control is king. There are a ton of new systems in EU5 that intertwine and converge, but none in my eyes are more relevant and potent than the control mechanics. In its simplest terminology, control is how potent your government's grip on a location is. It ranges from 0 to 100, with 100 being absolute control. Your control impacts how much you pull from a location, whether it be your share of the generated wealth or the amount of levies you can conscript into service once war rolls around. Control radiates outwards from your capital via proximity. Locations far from your capital or separated by rough terrain like mountains will naturally have lower control. It is important to note it is pretty much impossible to have every location have 100% control unless you are a tiny nation. This means when building or developing your realm, you will want to focus on the regions that you can realistically keep control of. Investing in infrastructure by building roads, bailiffs, and temples can help you increase your control within your nation, though the buildings like bailiffs and temples have the negative effect of also empowering the estates, so keep that in mind and don't spam them. You can also increase control through cabinet actions, but it's often better to focus your cabinet on creating cores by aligning your population to your existing society, which in return increases your control. Before you can establish broad control, it is often wise to rely on subjects, or vassals in the early game, to manage your newly conquered and far-flung or low-control territories. Looking at England here, it looks like Cornish independence is now a valid strategy, at least for England early on. After all, we can always annex them again once they invent the pasty factories in the late game. Tip 2. The 25% Crown Power Trap. Like Control, in Tip 1, Crown Power is another key modifier. Crown Power represents your ruling faction's share of the political and economic power. It is the measure of your centralized authority. It technically ranges from 0% to 100%, but in reality, if you have less than 25% crown power, it's over. You must keep this above 25% at all cost. Because of how many of EU5's systems are interconnected, if your crown power dips below 25%, you suffer a massive penalty to production income, tax income, and trade efficiency. And this is truly crippling for your economy. But not only that, it has other effects on the nation. It also affects your parliament support, cabinet efficiency, and more. Basically, you can kind of lock yourself out of, well, everything if it dips even lower. 25% crown power and below is essentially a death spiral. Crown power is a bit of a balancing act, as your authority is constantly being challenged by estates, the political interests of your nation, and its population. The primary way you lose your crown power is by granting privileges to keep those estates' satisfaction up. It's very inviting after all, as for example, high satisfaction gives you bonuses, like with the clergy, who if you keep them happy, you get a boost to research speed. But just remember, each privilege boosts their power and reduces yours. Furthermore, it's often much easier to give a privilege than it is to revoke it, as later it will often cost you dearly in regards to prestige and estate opinion. To raise your crown power, invest in the centralization national values and ensure that your best land is fully integrated as a core province, which gives you a strong flat boost to control, and high control equals more crown power. You can start seeing how these systems are interconnected, and that's why they are Tip 1 and Tip 2 here. Now let's look at something kind of completely different. Tip 3. Cheaper construction and the building loop. Tip 3 is about the foundation of your economy, the engine of development. Simply put, we're going to look at the interplay between pops and buildings. Buildings are your primary tool for growth, but they are useless without qualified pops to staff them. peasants and labourers must promote to higher professions like burghers to fill the advanced jobs within a building. While you'll want to master pops and promotion, there is another hack that you'll need to understand, which I missed, to actually create a thriving economy in any nation, and that is to exploit cheaper construction. Let me break it down. Building costs require gold and specific input goods like lumber and masonry. If these construction goods are cheap in your market, you'll get a massive discount, up to 66% of the total cost. You can and should subsidize or import these raw construction materials to deliberately collapse their prices, making your development spending go 3 times further. This is an intentional hack. You can and should deliberately subsidize or overproduce these raw construction materials to collapse their prices. This allows you to rapidly build your economic foundation. After all, EU5 is a game of priorities. In the early game, the benefit of cheaper buildings is often more valuable than the profit you'd make selling the raw materials themselves. And you want to get your economic engine moving, and this is one of the ways to do so. After all, the rest of your economic growth is directly tied to things like population growth or the shifting demography of your nation, which can take a long time to expand. So by doing this, you remove one of the early game challenges. There's also merit to doing this with other, more complex goods, such as paper, to make sure you can create enough books in your realm to increase your ability to improve your nation's literacy and administration. For example, getting lots of books early on will allow you to spam libraries, increasing your max literacy and getting you ahead in tech. In terms of priority, I'd make sure that lumber and masonry are the cheapest, and then you'll want to make sure that sand is really cheap for glass production. After that, you can look into things like clay, paper, and the slightly more complex goods. Tip 4. Efficiency is free money. Tip 4 is about how you generate massive surpluses through efficiency. And no, we don't mean by being efficient in the way that you personally deal with things, but with efficiency modifiers. Anytime you see an efficiency modifier in game, you need to prioritize it, because it's always more valuable than it looks. For example, a 20% tax efficiency doesn't just mean 20% more income. It can actually double your net income. This is because your expenses scale with your base economic size, but your income scales with your efficiency boosted size. Since the higher tax rate doesn't increase your fundamental expenses, the extra money is pure profit that just goes right into your treasury. This is how a small nation can suddenly fund a large standing army, for example. This marginal principle also applies to production efficiency. It increases the physical output of your factories without increasing the input costs. Just like tax efficiency, this causes a much bigger net growth produced by your factories than the percentage suggests, because you're producing more with the same operational costs. These bonuses are essential for specializing in lucrative industries. Trade efficiency is valuable because it gets applied to the final sell value of trade, not just the profit margin. This means your profit increases by a significantly larger percentage, and you can see where we're going with this. Look for more ways to boost these efficiencies through laws, national values, and advances. They are the most consistent and powerful path to national wealth. And finally, while not directly an economic efficiency modifier, your cabinet efficiency modifier is also a huge one to look out for, as higher cabinet efficiency will speed up all of your personal actions and make redefining your realm in your image powerfully easy. Tip 5. Embrace the nature of the game. Our final tip is more about the mindset than anything mechanical. EU5 covers 5 centuries, and what's powerful at the start will not be powerful later on. There are plenty of trials and tribulations that will hamper your progress. You have to be willing to change your focus and your national values to keep up with the times. Your economy starts as rural and favors traditional economic values. RGOs and villages are easier to grow and staff. However, you've got a plan to switch to an urban-based economy and focus on advanced factories and capital economy values if you're to keep up in the late game. The Black Death, as well, is an early game massive reset, wiping out qualified pops and forcing you to use the basic peasant laborers in villages, and it can feel like that the hard work you've put in is just gone. But that's on purpose. Investing in roads during this time rather than building is a smart play, but you need to have the mindset that it's temporary. The military shifts just as dramatically. Early wars are fought with massive cheap levies and high initiative cavalry. And to that regard, cavalry is very strong very early, but it falls off. As the ages advance, you'll rely on regulars and artillery to take over as the damage dealer, and by the age of revolutions, artillery is the core component of your fighting force. You must adapt your army composition as the technology progresses. Survive, adapt, overcome, and all that. But again, that's not really a tip, so let me give you a bonus 6th tip. Tip 6. Automation. If the real world is anything to go by, just making an AI do something seems to be the go-to. But in EU5, that's actually a very valid strategy that you shouldn't be afraid to use. The game's complexity is its strength, but you don't have to learn everything all at once. Most of the in-game tabs have an automation feature, which will allow the AI to take decisions and manage things on your behalf. Like a real government, you too can give over the management of politics to an outside corporation and an AI algorithm. More importantly though, in my mind, is the fact that you can use automation to automate tedious or unwieldy tasks as the game progresses. For example, in the automations menu, you can automate the construction of buildings and provide spending limits. Or say you've beaten your enemy's military and now you've just got to siege their nation. Fret not, there's an automated carpet siege feature. And finally, a third key automation to play around with is the trade capacity spending, so that you can partially or fully automate trade to your heart's content within each market, rather than the whole market economy. It's about maximizing your personal and government efficiency after all. And that's it. Those are my top tips for EU5. I do of course recommend you check out the full tutorial course over on the Europa Universalis channel. That is if you want a more in-depth tutorial. I had the pleasure of working on it, and all of us that created that tutorial are really proud of the final product. I'll link it in the description. Be sure to check out my other guides if you're looking for more, and if you're looking for something fun, well, check out one of my playthrough videos. Whatever you do, be ambitious, or something.